The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the book club show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana Mahmood and I do have a special show today, alhamdulillah, and we've got a brilliant guest and a brilliant book. On today's show, we are going to be talking about a Treasury of Aisha radiallahu anha. This is a book written by Dr. Sofia Rehman. The little subtitle at the bottom says "A Guidance from the Beloved of the Beloved." That in itself, as soon as I received the book, it really did touch my heart in a really amazing way. And straight away, I think I knew that I was going to really enjoy this book. As always, I am going to read the blurb at the back and do an introduction to our guest. So, A Treasury of Aisha. Aisha bint Abu Bakr radiallahu anha has been an inspiration and paragon for Muslims since the first generation of believers emerged. Hailed as a guiding light, a fount of wisdom, and a purveyor of the prophetic mission, Aisha's words have illuminated Islamic thought in all its branches. This book compiles 40 of her insights and statements in the categories of Quranic exegesis, tafsir, jurisprudence, fiqh, theology, aqidah, politics, siyasa, and heart softeners, al-raqaiq, with commentary for the contemporary Muslim seeking spiritual and moral direction as they traverse through daily life and its challenges and possibilities. So that's a really beautiful blurb to this book, A Treasury of Aisha. It's a perfect read for Ramadan. Inshallah, it's something that if you don't already have, you should definitely put it on your list. Buy it straight away. It's going to be a beautiful companion during this month, inshallah. So moving on to the introduction to our lovely guest, who is Dr. Sofia Rehman. She is an independent scholar of Islam, trained both traditionally in Syria, Turkey, and Wales, and through academia, whose PhD focused on the statements of Aisha bint Abu Bakr, as recorded in the work of the 14th century scholar Imam al-Zarqashi. Her book based on this thesis is entitled Gendering the Hadith Tradition, Recentering the Authority of Aisha, Mother of the Believers. She is an advocate of bridging the gap between academic scholarship on Islam and the wider Muslim community, setting up critical reading groups and workshops with global reach to facilitate learning, curiosity, and spiritual empowerment. So without further ado, I'm going to say Assalamu alaikum to Dr. Sofia Rehman. How are you today?
Wa alaikum assalam, Imrana. Jazakallah khair. What a beautiful introduction to myself and the book from you. So pleased that you've read and enjoyed the book. I love what you just said about the subtitle of the book, because that's a guidance from the beloved of the beloved. It seems to have touched quite a few of the readers, so that's always a nice thing for authors to hear, that from the word go people have enjoyed the book. But yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm very well today. Thank you. All the more better for being here with you.
Jazakallah, thank you so much for saying that. But again, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to me, and hopefully inshallah our listeners are going to take so much benefit from today's show. I guess what would be nice just though to start off with is for Ramadan, do you have any particular intentions or I don't know, any ways that you plan and prepare for the month, and what does that look like? I'm quite interested.
So I always have a slightly unconventional way of approaching my Ramadans. I know a lot of people go in with brilliant, wonderful, intentions, and that's absolutely wonderful. For me, I usually go in, my primary goal for the month is always just to be entirely immersed in my reading of the Quran, so nothing else, and I just want to read the Quran and let it be open to delivering a particular theme or message to me. So every single year in Ramadan, I feel like the Quran gives me a particular message, and it's always something that I really need at that time in my life. Last year, it was very much about grief. I noticed a lot about sorrow in the Quran, and how one heals, and how the prophets, many of the prophets alayhim salam, suffered in their various ways, and how they had tawakkul, complete reliance upon Allah, and how they found their feet during their turbulent times, and of course others beyond the prophets as well. You know, we have the wonderful example of Maryam alayhi salam, we have the example of Khawla in Surah Al-Mujadila, we have the example of Asiya, the wife of Fir'aun. So we have all these tremendous examples in the Quran, and I think it was very much related to the fact that, you know, I'd entered Ramadan last year off the back of a really difficult year. I'd lost my father quite quickly and quite drastically, and that sort of connection to my father in this earthly realm was so suddenly severed, even though we knew for some time that he was unwell, and it could happen. And it happened beautifully. It happened in exactly the way he wanted. And it happened with such grace. And even as it was happening, you know, we just felt overwhelmed by Allah's generosity and blessings and ease, even during that difficult time. But, you know, a loss like that is still a difficult one to process, you know, despite these things. So last year, you know, that was the message I felt the Quran gave me. The year before that, it would have delivered a different message. The year before that, another one. And so this year, I'm just, this is the intention that I always go into Ramadan with. It's finishing a whole reading of the Quran, and just allowing myself to really hear what the Quran has to say to me, because as the divine book for all of humankind, you can read it in numerous times and it will always tell you something different. I mean, we all know this, isn't it? I'm sure, Imran, you've experienced this too, where you'll have read a verse, maybe you've read it a million times, and suddenly one day something clicks and it means something entirely different to you. So yeah, that's my intention that I go into Ramadan with.
And I think that's such an amazing intention, and a really a reminder, I think, for myself, because you're right. I mean, I think it was just maybe a few days ago and I was reading Quran and that very thing happened, and you suddenly see it in a new light, and it really resonates in a completely different way, which you know, that's exactly why the Quran is a miracle, you know, for so many reasons, but that definitely, I think, is one of them, that in any moment it can have such a profound effect in a different way. But no, I think that's so beautiful, and thank you for sharing that. So then coming on to, obviously, in the introduction, it said that obviously you are a scholar of Islam, and you know, I follow your work and absolutely love everything that you do, and I've taken so much from the things that you share. I guess my question is that I mean, you know, I guess my background is in teaching, and I'm, you know, a parent myself, and I know how much emphasis tends to be put on, you know, young people or people just, you know, studying the STEM subjects. So I guess I was really interested to know that what kind of inspired you to want to, to become a scholar of Islam, because obviously it's amazing. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'd like to know a little bit of the journey behind that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important question, and I hope that there are parents who are listening, because I didn't have a straightforward, you know, sort of route into Islamic studies. So I really came from a background which was sort of culturally Muslim and culturally observant. So Pakistani background, born and raised in London, but not really any great emphasis on, you know, learning or studying the deen any more than sort of the basic things that we're all taught when we're kids. And then sort of when I was about probably 15, 16, I started to become more religious myself, started orienting myself towards my Deen a lot more. I started praying 5 times a day, wanted to read more. And sort of it started university, and my parents were really pleased when I was like, I'm off to study, what was it, information management at UCL, and which was like a combination of computer science and business management. So they were super happy with that.
Yeah, I could imagine. They must be like, massive tick.
Yeah, oh yeah. And then sort of 3 months into the course, I was hating it. I'd become, really convinced that what I really wanted to do actually was not become a millionaire by the time I'm 21, as I had so sort of, arrogantly in the arrogance that you only have in, your youth. I decided actually maybe that's not what I want to do, and I want to pursue Islamic studies. But my parents were just, as most parents are, they were really concerned that well, what will you do with an Islamic studies degree? And I even said to them at the time, I said, look, Oxford University has a degree program in Islamic studies. What if I went to Oxford? What if I could get in there? Because I had like fairly straight strong A levels, so I was convinced that I could get into Oxford. I don't know if I could have, but I was convinced I could. And my mum was like, no, not not even Oxford is gonna sway me. So I was like, okay, fine. Decided to go back into business management, economics, and I went off to King's College, still hating the degree, but I do believe that you make your intention and Allah will open up doors for you. So I remember on my very first sort of induction day, they're telling us all the modules we can take up, and one of the things that they had was a language option. So I opened up the little pamphlet that they'd given us, and I thought, ooh, Mandarin. That was like, I thought maybe I'll do Mandarin or some other, unique language that will make me interesting and different, and open up a different culture and world to me. But I saw Arabic on there, and I grasped that with both hands. So I made sure I took Arabic as a module every year throughout my degree. And then when I left university, when I finished university, I got married, and I was very focused on marrying somebody who wanted to study and had similar objectives to me. My parents had always said, look, just get yourself a strong degree, strong in inverted commas. They said, get yourself a strong degree and then you can do whatever you want, but at least you've got this backup plan. Which, by the way, in the almost 20 years since I graduated, I have never used. Of course. So, the backup plan, it was just a waste of 3 years of my life. Well, no, I don't want to say that. Obviously, I gained lots of skills, and, that is where my Arabic started. So my husband was already studying out in Syria. He'd been there about 3 years already. So we got married. I moved out to Syria straight away. I started studying. I was doing Arabic out there, tajweed, and some fiqh. And that was where the journey started. So, a very long, roundabout route, but we got there in the end.
Long but lovely. That's really, it's so nice to get a bit of insight actually into kind of someone's journey, because we don't always get to know that, and I think I love the fact that what you said straight from the beginning, that is very kind of like non-traditional and not kind of that straight route, and and I'm sure there's so many kind of parents or even younger people that listening in who've probably experienced the same. And I guess I'm kind of thinking that like if we come to the book itself, which is obviously a Treasury of Aisha, the first chapter, which is basically looking at the tafsir of Aisha bint Abu Bakr anha. So it opens with an anecdote, which I'm going to read, and then obviously I'd like to ask you a question about that. So it says that One day, the first Umayyad Caliph Muawiyah asked a man in his entourage, who is the most knowledgeable of all people, presumably calculating that giving a forthright answer might not be the most advantageous course of action. The man replied, "Leader of the believers, it is you." But when the Khalif pressed him for a more honest response, he answered, "Well, if you insist, then it is Aisha." So obviously then you go on to then explain, how I guess that is it kind of exemplifies a certain, I guess, attitude. I don't know if that's the right word to use. But I guess my question is, what do you think? Obviously we know from history that there've been, numerous female scholars that have existed. Either their work was lost or kind of ignored. What do you think can be done to address the fact that female scholars do often get overlooked? And then I've got kind of a second part to that question is, and how can we preserve that kind of female scholarship for future generations to come?
That's a great question, and I think that could probably be the subject of an entire episode in and of itself. So I think the first thing in addressing particularly the latter question that you asked is actually to name those female scholars that already exist and who are already doing work and who are quite often sidelined. So this particular anecdote that you've read out, I actually found that in the work of a scholar and academic called Aisha Geisinger, and it's from an article that she wrote called Aisha bint Abu Bakr and her contributions to the formation of Islamic tradition. So if people want to look that up, they can. So I think that that's really important, that we uplift the works of other female scholars that are already out there currently doing this work, and to not approach their work from a position of suspicion. I think that sadly a lot of Muslim women's work gets put under a scrutiny that Muslim men's work doesn't necessarily receive. And that's by no means specific to the Muslim community. I think in general, when women do something, especially if it's considered as being within the realm of what has traditionally been men's role, it comes under scrutiny in a way that men simply just don't experience. So I think that when we do approach the work of Muslim female scholars, we should do so from a position of curiosity rather than suspicion, and a position of trust as well, rather than mistrust, because I think that can often happen, sadly, and that gets in the way of us being able to access their work and benefit from their work. And we have to allow ourselves the ability to say, I disagree, but I'm not going to discount everything you say. I think there's too much that's invested in sort of the personality, that's behind a given work. We do create this sort of cult of personality. So if we like somebody's work, then there's almost this obligation to like everything they say and everything they do, and this sort of fangirling or fanboying around an individual is unhealthy. So I just think, allow yourself to say, okay, I like this person's work. I agree with some things. I disagree with some things. It doesn't mean that I have to, we don't need to have the cult of personality around everyone out there. To take it back to, sort of women of the past and, our Islamic intellectual heritage. Again, I'm going to name another female Muslim scholar, Asma Saeed. She's got a fantastic book. It's called Women and the Transmission of Religious Knowledge in Islam. It's an academic text, so it's a little bit on the pricey side, but I'm sure there's somebody on eBay selling it at an accessible price. Or order it into your libraries.
Yes.
And she does this incredible mapping of women's inclusion and then exclusion in sort of in the production of knowledge in Islamic history. And she maps out really beautifully, really well for us, the multiple sort of factors at play that have caused women's scholarship or their involvement in scholarship to be marginalized. But there are some really interesting things. I mean, people put it down to misogyny, and I think that that's a really very naive, very reductive way of answering that question. It's certainly not only that. That might be an element, but there's so much else. There's politics, there's economics, there's social factors, there's cultural factors. I mean, so many different things come into play. I mean, even with Aisha radiallahu anha, what I found, so it's just a sad state of fate, you know. It's just how things developed in Medina. So when we look at the other schools of thought, you know, in Sunni Islam, so you've got the Hanafis, you've got the Shafi'is, you've got the Malikis, you've got the Hanbalis. Each of these schools of thought, and we can take the Hanbalis out of that because they came sort of later. So if we just look at the first three of those, they all sort of emerge from a particular center of Islamic learning, you know, in the Muslim Empire. So you've got Kufa, you've got Basra in Iraq, and then you've got Egypt as well. These sort of emerge as the greatest centers of learning, and then of course you've got Medina as well. But what happens in Egypt and Iraq is that these schools attach themselves to particular Sahaba, particular companions, to give greater authority to the legal rulings that they develop. Because as you know, many of we listeners will know as well, that the Quran actually gives very little by way of legal verdicts. It's not a legal text by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, people may interpret certain verses to be, you know, legal, but even then, even with the most legalistic lens, the Quran is still not a legal text. So that's where the hadith come in. And so having the hadith in the formulation of these schools of law was really important, and getting that legitimacy meant attaching oneself to a particular Sahaba. So that's where you have Ibn Umar, you have certain Sahaba sort of emerge as leading narrators of hadith, because they become affiliated through their own travels and through networks within those regions to these particular schools of law. So that's the Hanafis, the Shafi'is, the Hanafis and the Shafi'is, and then the Hanbalis sort of emerge out of the Shafi'i madhab. The Maliki madhab, now that's based in Medina. They had a very different approach to the hadith. They didn't come on board with hadith for a little while, because Imam Malik, as you know, he very much believed in the Sunnah of Medina. So, you know, whatever people were practicing in Medina, that was the Sunnah. So he had this belief in almost the cultural output of Medina being the guidance that we need. Now, Aisha and her network was based in Medina. So as the schools of law are developing, the Maliki madhab is the one that is not resistant to, but it's less inclined to attaching itself to a single Sahabi, because it doesn't, it's the city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It has the majority of the Sahaba still there. It's already sort of, colored in that way of being that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam first touched. So, there's not that same inclination. So here, one can't really say, oh, it's misogyny. So you have to do history is much more nuanced than that. But yeah, it's almost at the very root of our especially our Islamic law, that that's one of the many factors that will have marginalized Aisha's voice. But I talk about this in a lot more depth in my PhD, which you kindly mentioned at the beginning in your introduction, is also going to be published, hopefully, inshallah, later this year or early next year by OUP. So if people are interested in learning more about that, then look out for my next publication, and maybe Imran and I can have another chat then.
I would love to do that. But yeah, no, I mean, I look forward to it. So yeah, Oxford University Press, which is the Genuine Hadith Tradition, Recentering the Authority of Aisha, Mother of the Believers. And yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful connection. And like you said, when a voice gets, I guess, marginalized, the more work, I guess, that, scholars can do to rebalance that, obviously, I think is really important. So we are approaching the end of the first half of the show. We are talking to Dr. Sofia Rehman about her book, A Treasury of Aisha, which has been published by Cuba Publishing. I'm going to mention the little kind of subtitle again because I love it so much, which is A Guidance from the Beloved of the Beloved. So you can, obviously we've got the ad break now, but you can join us back in a few moments. So assalamu alaikum.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Book Club show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana Mahmood, and on today's show we are joined by Dr. Sofia Rehman, and we are talking about her wonderful book called A Treasury of Aisha. And this, in the first half of the show, we were talking a little bit about Dr. Sofia's kind of journey to writing the book, to becoming a scholar of Islam, mashallah. We were talking a little bit about female scholarship and the importance of really preserving the female scholars that are already doing work. But yeah, and just, I guess, the need to really keep those voices, keep those platforms for future generations to come as well, inshallah. So the question I was going to move on to next is one of the sections in the book is called Finding Strength in the Creator over Creation. When I was reading the book, it kind of was for me a reminder that you also said, for example, that it's important to take account of ourselves regularly and to purify our intentions. It made me immediately think that we are obviously now in a kind of an age of social media. One of the reasons, for example, of the book club show is kind of to help listeners and even myself to reconnect with reading and reconnect in a way where we're not always spending time maybe kind of on screen and, all these whatever platforms it is that we might be using. But there was one point that that I was thinking about the emphasis on those outward aesthetics, but you mentioned at one point that the danger, we're using all these filters, but what about the danger of our heart being filtered out too? And that really was like just like I don't know, like an awakening for me. It really, hit home a little bit. So I guess the question is that what advice would you give to any of the listeners about how we can actually make more time for reflection, time to reflect and pause and, introspection as well?
Oh, I love that question. And really, I think it's one of those things that will be unique to each person. So, some people have such hectic days and it's like, well, when do you slide in, time to self-reflect? So I suppose it really comes down to each person deciding to how and when they do that. But I think, take any activity and turn it into an ibadah. Like, we all know the intent, the hadith about every action is by its intention. And by that, you can pretty much turn everything into an act of worship. But when it comes to meditating on or stopping to really to ponder over, think over our the state of our ego and the rest of that, I really do think one has to ask themselves the why, the big why of why am I doing this? What's the real driving force behind this. And our first reaction, our first answer will always be one that serves us. Yeah. So I find that the first answer that we give to ourselves to that will be something that makes real good sense to us and makes us feel really good. But you have to dig even further, and then you have to go, yeah, okay, but now really, why are you doing it? So for example, you know, if I have written this book, let's take that for an example. I've written this book. Why have I written this book? And I'll tell myself, you know, I've written this book because it was a dream of mine to be able to contribute something to the Treasury series of Cube. And, you know, it's linked to my scholarship already, and I hope that it's going to benefit the Ummah. Then I have to ask myself, and what if nobody read the book? What if there was 0 sales? How would you feel? You know, and I think, and I'd probably, you know, I'm not going to lie, I'd be devastated. And, you know, I mean, not even my family and friends have supported me. But, you know, then I have to ask myself the question, okay, well, what if there are sales? But what if you start getting terrible reviews? What if people are out there saying, oh, she's this, she's that, this book is riddled with flaws, blah. So again, I have to ask myself, why am I really doing this? How will I feel? Will I be offended if people do that? Well, if my intention was, oh, I'm doing this for the sake of Allah only anyway, then hopefully I can take any critique and listen to it. And if it is legitimate, I will take it on board and I will make amends to the next round of print, although mashallah Cube were incredible, so I really don't think that there are any sort of you know, flaws on that level. But if there may still be, it's still a human endeavor, so you know, nothing is perfect except for what Allah creates, so you know, there may well be critique. So what I mean to say is that each one of us have to really sit and ask ourselves the why of what we do, and to continue, and not to be satisfied at the first answer, but to carry on pushing ourselves until we come to the actual, you know, some kernel of truth about the why that drives us, and that we have to constantly be doing that. And you can do that anywhere. You can do that while you're cooking. You can do that while you're driving. You can do that while you're having a bath, while you're in the shower. I mean, we all know what great epiphanies happen in the shower. You know, you can do that for 5 minutes after, not even 5 minutes, do it for 30 seconds after you finish your salah. I really do think that going inward and asking ourselves for the why of what we do is really important.
I really love that, because it is that thing of our egos obviously get in the way, and we try to almost, I mean, I say we, I should speak about myself, but you know, you try to trick yourself almost, maybe sometimes, that, oh yeah, this is kind of my intention, and sometimes that does get muddled with, you know, other things that might be on our mind. But I think the example that you've given is really perfect, and the advice that you've given about when potentially to turn something into a ibadah, but more importantly, you know, questioning ourselves, I guess, on a regular basis. And you mentioned obviously this book that you've written, A Treasury of Aisha, is obviously part of a series which has been published by Q Publishing. I think there's about 7, if I'm right. So I know there's kind of the Treasury of, I think, Imam al-Ghazali and Maulana Rumi, so that, you know, and it's so amazing for your book obviously now to be a part of that. And I guess, if you know, maybe moving on to another part of the book that you've touched upon, there's a chapter, or kind of a sub chapter, so to speak, which is looking at about the pursuit of justice, and you touch upon like societal hierarchies and power dynamics and the way the Prophet ﷺ addressed these. Now, what is there anything else that maybe you can suggest, that, like, how are we to identify, for example, the privileges that we have, but in a way that then we are able to fulfill, you know, certain duties that we have? They might be civic or societal, or, you know, in terms of family. But, you know, basically with the intention of to be just and to be compassionate.
Such great questions, Imran, mashallah. I think for this, so there's a book by a lady called Ijeoma, let me get her surname right, Oluo, and it's called So You Want to Talk About Race. So this might seem like I'm starting off in a very tangential spot, but I promise I come back to answering your question. And when I listened to the audiobook of that, and I thought to myself, this is 21st century tasawwuf or tazkiyah, depending on how you want to call this. This is spiritual purification for the 21st century. This is a literal manual. This woman is not a Muslim. She's a Black American lady. She works on civil rights. She works on anti-racism, specifically against Black folk in America. But the way she's laid out that book, where she names the ailment, which a lot of our classical scholars do, right? So they'll name an ailment of the heart, for example, like pride, and then they'll describe pride, and then they'll describe how to overcome it. They give you the antidote to it. And that's pretty much how she lays out her book. And I thought, this is 21st century tasawwuf, tazkiyah. This is what we ought to do. So what she's doing in the book essentially is giving voice to a marginalized and oppressed community. We all know about racism and how it works and the particularly nefarious ways in which it presents itself in America. But I mean, it's no less nefarious in the UK. It's just, we don't have the same access to guns, but it's just as violent in the UK as it is in America. And other, there are, of course, other marginalized communities too. And so what I really think we have to do is to actively seek out those marginalized communities, those marginalized voices. And I love how you asked in the question, you posed it as how do we fulfill this duty as a civic obligation, but you also mentioned the family. So look at who is maligned in your family. Look at who's taken advantage of in your family. Look at who's always left out or not invited to the table, or, in some way, shape or form kept at the margins, and figure out what their story really is. Don't go on hearsay, find out why they are in the position that they are in the family. There might be an injustice that, you could potentially correct and gain reward for. There is opportunity in every single day to do an act that is just. And you know what? And we don't have to think, people start thinking about the big and the grand. And of course, the big and the grand is exactly what we should also be aiming for. But it starts in the house. I have 4 children by Allah's grace. And even if I'm making 4 little plates of fruit, I will count the number of grapes on each of their plates, lest I give one more than the other. Or, when I'm making their lunch boxes in the morning, I must give all of them lunches that are commensurate with the others. Sometimes they have their own personal preferences, but no one lunch should look greater than the other. So it starts in the small things, and once you make yourself habituated to always trying to be that agent of justice in the small things, our fitra, which is made to establish justice, because that is the purpose for which Allah created us, that will be awoken and it will be made stronger, and we will then find injustice around us so intolerable that we will always react to it. But you start in the small, and that's how we train our nafs, that's how we train ourselves, and then become, justice is a light. So the more we establish it in our lives, the more illuminated our gaze is. The sight that we have becomes illuminated by that, and so therefore whenever we see an injustice, we react. And so I think really it's about training ourselves into that, and we can start with the small things and then head outwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, I mean, yeah, you using the word like illumination, and it definitely kind of, I get that sense. And again, what you said about starting in the small things, because I think that's what it is. You end up having this ripple effect, don't you? And you start at home, you start with that intention, and then Allah, inshallah, will put the blessing in it, and guide it to something bigger, inshallah. So that's really, really wonderful. So maybe what we'll do is maybe another question just to finish off. So obviously the book itself that you've written, a Treasury of Aisha, which is obviously looking at the kind of personality of Aisha bint Abu Bakr radiallahu anha. You touch upon different things, so even within the kind of introduction and the contents page is part of it, which is looking at the tafsir. There's matters of Aqidah, Sayyidina Aisha in terms of her political influence, and I think there was one thing that really kind of, well, not just one thing, there's so many, but that also stood out is you made a specific, you say, I think the word you use, like a breakaway from the other Treasury series, is to kind of put emphasis on one particular story of Sayyidina Aisha, which is when which was about the slander against Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha. So I guess the question really was why you felt the need to want to dedicate kind of a whole chapter to that, which is obviously different to maybe the rest of the book.
Oh, wow. So again, a topic really that we could dedicate a whole hour, maybe days to. So the story of the slander of Aisha radiallahu anha isn't a story that gets a lot of attention. And when it does, it's very quickly glazed over, I feel. I mean, I know certainly for myself, when I first finally got to this incident in her life, I'd been a student of knowledge for many, many years. So it was a real sort of curiosity for me. Why haven't I learned more about this history and this particular time in history, which is so important in the life of Aisha and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that I wanted to go back to it and really give it some attention. And so again, I did that in my PhD. I went back to historical sources like Imam al-Tabari's Tarikh, which is just an incredible resource for us to have as Muslims. He goes into so much detail on the whole history, really. It's so many volumes, but he really gives light to this particular issue as well. And I also wanted to read it from a woman's perspective, so when this story is discussed, it's very much from a masculine male perspective, which focuses on the Prophet ﷺ's feelings or the political intentions behind this, or the political impact that it had, and the machinations that were going around in Medina at the time that created space for this kind of story to emerge. But we don't go into the granular level and look at, well, what did this mean in the life of Aisha? She is the most beloved wife of the Prophet ﷺ. She is, one of the youngest by this time. She is beautiful. She's in the prime of her youthfulness. She's known for her beauty. She comes from an honorable family. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is a man of great stature within the community. And yet she has now been accused of one of the worst things a believing woman could be accused of, essentially being unfaithful to the Prophet ﷺ. And what would that have done to her? I mean, if we all just take a moment and imagine being a young woman, only married for a few years, to one of the most powerful men, to then be accused of infidelity, and to have the reaction from the Prophet ﷺ, which was one of doubt, essentially, and even her parents doubted her. She was truly on her own. And again, I think that for a lot of Muslim women especially, whilst we may not have had this exact experience, I think we all experience, especially in the early days of marriage, in the early years of marriage, we do experience shades of isolation or types of isolation, especially if you've moved out of your family home and into your husband's family home. And, you know, you can be two perfectly well-suited families, but, you know, sort of these you know, issues may arise and we can feel like we're all alone. And so going through, you know, our mother Aisha's experience and seeing how she navigated that, I felt was something really important for Muslim women to be able to reflect on. But I also thought it was really important for Muslim men to reflect on as well, that, you know, think about what your wife is going through. Look at how Aisha felt and what she went through, and learn from the example of the Prophet ﷺ as well. So for me, that's why it was really important to go through that. I feel like there are so many lessons that are missed because the reading of that story ends up being embroiled in, you know, sort of the politics of that time, but also the politics of our time, where it ends up becoming a sectarian conversation as well. You know, sort of a Sunni Shia divide emerges on this story. And whilst all of these things are important, we actually miss out on innumerable valuable lessons for all of us. So that's why it was really important for me.
And you know, I'm glad that you did that, because I think by doing that, you do kind of compel the reader to really focus, obviously, on the whole book, but especially that chapter. And I think, to be honest, it's a very common theme for me when I was reading the book, the idea that there's so many ahadith that have been narrated by Sayyidina Aisha anha that don't really get any emphasis. I mean, I don't know how many, you know, circles that I've been to, study circles, and that you end up having a lot of learning, I guess, from the hadith that she narrated. And I think that's why this book is so important. And just to touch on what you said about for not just women, for men, I mean, I know I was saying to you just before the show that this is definitely a book that I'll be kind of purchasing as a gift for not just the female members of my family, but, you know, male members as well, because it's so important that we're all collectively as an ummah really learning from, you know, the beloved wife of the Prophet ﷺ, because as you know, the book is called, it is the Treasury of Aisha. So we have obviously talked about this beautiful book. It's been published by Q Publishing. For anyone listening who'd like to follow your work, what is the best way to kind of do that? Is, you know, if you can share any kind of details for that.
Yeah, so the best way, thank you, is through my Instagram. So you can find me on Instagram at Sofia, that's SOFIA _reading. So that's probably the best way to connect with me. I literally do not exist on any other social media platform. So that's the best way to connect.
That's brilliant. And actually for anybody listening, like I said, this is definitely a book for Ramadan, for outside Ramadan. It's a gift, inshallah, for Eid, obviously, which will be around the corner. But just to say, it's been absolute wonderful speaking to you, Dr. Sofia Rehman. It's an absolute privilege, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to me today.
Oh no, Jazakallah khair. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I hope it's been fruitful for your audience.
Absolutely, inshallah. And I will be back, listeners, next week with a new book and hopefully, inshallah, a new guest. In the meantime, please do keep us in your du'as, and I wish you the best of the rest of Ramadan. Assalamu alaikum.
day be filled with love and light. May your wrongs be right, may your songs be tight. May your words give sight, may your nur shine bright. May you always be on the righteous side of the fight. May your lovers be loyal, may your soil be fertile. May your khaki stay creased, may your locks stay oil. May your plans never get foiled, may your plot thicken. May your chicken be halal, may your style be sufficient. May your soul be free of its prison. May Allah increase you in your vision. May you find everything you've been missing. May you awake for prayer before the sun has risen. When you speak, may your audience listen. May you never feel trapped in the system. May you sire many righteous children who will act on prophetic tradition. May you always have food on your plate. May you learn from every mistake. May you rise above all the hate. And may Allah increase you in your state. May you never pretend that you are what you ain't. May your friends be real and never be fake. May your rent never have to be late. And may your health always be great. May Allah forgive every sin, now and forever if you falter again. And may you always stay close with your kin. And may He make all your enemies friends. May He make reality of your plans. May your present be pleasant, may you have a good end. May your heart be purified of its flaws. And may you act according to the laws that were revealed in the book of Allah. And may He catch you whenever you fall. May the One guide you to the truth. And when you doubt, may He show you the proof. May you be like the Ahl Suf, with the wisdom of the elders, the energy of the youth. May He accept your prayers and your fast, the very first all the way to the last. And remove obstacles that you have. And may you receive everything that you ask. May you never have regret for your past. And receive mercy, not the wrath. And as you travel down your personal path, may you always have a reason to laugh.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at InspireFM Luton.